Welcome back to Just Law on IQRA TV. This is the second part to the show. I'm your host Ilyas Bulbulia. Just before the break, we had a number of callers calling in asking questions about immigration matters. Let's go back to our callers and let's see where we get to. Hello, assalamu alaikum.
Hello, जी वालेकुम।
Welcome, जी भाई. Thank you for calling. जी.
पाना है ना, तुसी ना मेरे बेटे को ना उसका ईमेल एड्रेस ले लो, तुसी अपना पूरा एड्रेस तो फोन नंबर सानू ईमेल कर दियो, ਅਸੀਂ ईमेल तो उनको अपॉइंटमेंट डेविड दिन ले लांगे उसको वकील साहब।
जी जी ठीक है। तो आप ऐसे करो, आपका जो टेलीफोन नंबर है ना, आप वो कंट्रोल रूम को छोड़ दो और मैं आपको जैसे भी शो फिनिश होता है मैं आपको फ़ोन करता हूँ और मेरा ईमेल एड्रेस आपको दे दूँगा। सो आप कंट्रोल रूम में आपका नंबर छोड़ दो, ठीक
है?
ओके, तो थैंक यू फॉर योर कॉल। थैंक यू। विल टेक आवर नेक्स्ट कॉल। हेलो, अस्सलाम वालेकुम। जी वालेकुम। जी भाई, thank you for calling. What's your question?
Brother, my question is regarding spouse visa.
Okay, all right, far away. Yep.
What it is, I don't currently meet the income requirement of 18,600.
I understand. Okay.
And I heard about the adequate maintenance test.
Yep. Okay.
And my son is in receipt of disability living allowance.
I understand. Okay.
So, am I eligible to apply for a spouse visa?
Okay. Potentially, your son is eligible to apply without meeting the 18,600 requirement, because the 18,600 requirement is a starting point. It's the general rule which applies to spouse applications in terms of meeting the financial requirement, but there are exceptions to it. And if you're in receipt of certain benefits, disability living allowance, PIP, carers allowance for people who care for somebody who's disabled, if you meet certain benefits, then you don't have to meet the 18,600 requirement. As you quite rightly said, the requirement is that there should be adequate maintenance. Adequate maintenance, generally speaking, is for a husband and wife, as long as they receive £115 a week, that's adequate maintenance. If there's no rental or council tax, which is payable by them. So £115 a week for a couple is sufficient. Now, when calculating the money that's coming in, you can take into account and lump together the disability benefits and also income support and any other benefits that the person receives, employment support allowance, etc. If you add them all together, and if the benefits that your son receives, if that amounts to £115 a week, then it's not a problem. He can sponsor his wife and meet the financial requirement based on the money he receives from benefits. So that should potentially work. How much does your son receive?
He receives, I think it's about £400 a month.
Right, okay. What about in terms of income support? Does he receive something else on top of that, or is that it? Is it
No, that's it.
Okay, right. At £400 a month, there is a bit of a shortfall because it's £115 a week. So he's probably short by, not 60, it's probably more than that. So he's probably short by about £60–70 a month. Now, that shortfall can be met by savings. So if he's got a certain amount of savings, what he can do, rely on his benefits, so disability living allowance, rely on his income support, that gets him, as you say, £400 a month, and then he can rely on his savings to meet the shortfall. So just off the top of my head, if the shortfall is about £100 a week, he'd need savings. He might need quite a lot in savings actually, but there is a way of meeting the requirements by actually adding savings in. If you don't want to add savings in, then the other way of meeting the requirement is that he gets a part-time job earning, let's say, £50 a week, £100 a week. So in that situation, he's got his disability benefits, DLA and income support, he might have some savings, and he's got a job which earns him £50, £100, £150 a week, whatever it is. Combined, you can meet the financial requirement that way. So you don't have to meet the 18,600 requirement. You can meet the lesser requirement using benefits and your income, lesser income from employment, or potentially savings as well. There's different ways of meeting the requirement there. But you just need to be a bit careful. Sometimes you can meet the requirement by the shortfall by having savings, but you've got to be careful. If he's in receipt of income support, that may affect the amount he can have in savings. So it may be you can't rely on savings, you can rely on a job, a part-time job, could be sufficient if it's all combined, disability benefits and the part-time job. So potentially, yes, you're right, the adequate maintenance condition can be, is applicable, can be fulfilled in the circumstances that you've described. You might just need to just take some advice on how you actually go about meeting that specific requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much for your call. Thank you. Okay, so the matters we were discussing before we started was to look at how we make a successful spouse application. And as always, a lot of the calls that we get actually do relate to spouse applications. And we looked at that in the first week and in the second week, how you fulfill the requirements of requirements relating to spouse applications in terms of the marriage requirement, the relationship requirement, the income requirement, the accommodation requirement. And what I dealt with over the last couple of weeks is to look at the 18,600 rule, how you have to submit wage slips, etc. If you're self-employed, how you meet the requirements. And what I was hoping to do today was really look at extensions, but obviously we've not had too much time to go through that in a lot of detail. But what I might do next week is to look at what the exceptions are to the 18,600 rule. People who are in receipt of disability benefits, people who are in receipt of carers allowance, etc., how they can fulfill the income requirement without earning 18,600. But I'll look at that next week. But I mean, for purposes of today, we were looking at the extension applications, and I set out at the outset that somebody who comes here with a spouse visa, everything's been successful, they come here with a 2.5-year visa. And what you need to bear in mind really is when you do the extension, as I explained to one of the callers, is that there is a requirement that the English test that has to be, that the applicant in the UK has to sit and pass is at a slightly higher level. It was A1 when they initially came from abroad. This time round it would be an A2 test. That's the first requirement. The second requirement is that the financial requirements, again, we come back to the 18,600 requirement. If we fall within the exemption to that, can we meet it using disability benefits, carers allowance? We'll look at that in greater detail next week. A lot of the calls today focused on the income requirement. And thirdly, as I said, and equally important, is that we demonstrate that the relationship is subsisting. When you apply initially to sponsor a husband or wife to the United Kingdom, at that stage you have to demonstrate not only have you got married, this is genuine. So you would normally submit evidence of contact. So you're there submitting evidence of telephone calls, WhatsApp messages, when you've gone back to see your husband or wife in their home country, you've got your photographs together. So you're showing that this relationship, we entered into the marriage maybe 6 months ago, a year ago, we've shown that. We're also showing that the relationship is subsisting. So in a similar way, when the husband or wife comes to the United Kingdom and you're all living together here together, husband and wife in the same accommodation, we again need to demonstrate that the relationship is subsisting. How do we demonstrate that? On this occasion, we're not looking at telephone calls and WhatsApp messages together. That was for the first application. For this application, what you're looking at is proof that you're living at the same address. And for that, what the Home Office will look at is, do you receive correspondence at the same address? And has that correspondence been received over the last 2.5 years for the duration of the time that the couple have been living together? It's quite simple. All that's required is from day one, try and collect all the important letters, documents that the husband and wife both receive at the same address, either in joint names, single names, whatever it is, save it all. If you've got kids, save the documents for the kids as well. So when it comes to making the extension applications 2.5 years down the line, it's all there ready to go. So that in a nutshell is how you make a successful extension application in the United Kingdom. Now what I want to do next week is go back a bit and look at spouse applications, but specifically look at the exemptions to the 18,600 rule. When do you not need to meet that 18,600 rule? Inshallah, we'll do that next week on Monday at 6 o'clock. Until then, Assalamu alaikum.